welcome to another episode of Coffee with Clover. Thank you all for joining. Today I have a very interesting speaker. He has 10 years experience of being a radio host of the Black Community Public Affairs radio show, former CHRY 105 FM, now Vibe FM of the same frequency. And he was also the host of Blog Talk Radio. Please help me welcome Colin Jobe. Colin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
Okay. So you have had so many years of experience as a radio host, and then you went on to studying world Black history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was just something I stepped away from radio, stepped away from podcasting, and I just did it on my own, really. I just read a lot of books, watched a lot of documentaries. I've always been fascinated by it. I think a lot of that comes, as we talk about legacy, I think that comes to legacy from my dad, because my dad was always into politics. And I remember as a kid listening to him, watching news and stuff like that. And I learned from there, and I just sort of picked it up and ran with it and looked at it from how did it affect us, especially psychologically and economically.
Right.
And how does that translate? How does the past translate to the present? And what does that say about the future? So that's how I try to look at it.
And in doing that, you will be hosting your own podcast starting March 2023.
Exactly. I'm going to be doing my own show. It's called Different Opinions. And we're going to touch on, health, wealth, happiness, history, a lot of different topics, in fact, but from a Black perspective, and see how we can all enhance ourselves and live our best lives. So I'll be tapping into people who are experts, and they can help me learn. I'm going to be learning as well as I go through the process. So it should be interesting and exciting as we go through it. Great.
Welcome back to the community of hosting. It's not an easy.
Thank you.
Okay. So on the topic of legacy, as I've been highlighting for Black History Month, what are your thoughts on legacy?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's very important. I don't think we probably don't pay as much attention to it as we should, but I think it's funny. I never really paid much attention, even for myself. I never paid much attention to it. But then I have two daughters, and once I became a father, it became important. Like, what am I going to pass on to these guys? We're going to feed them, we're going to clothe them, but what kind of knowledge am I going to pass on to them? Do I have anything to pass on financially to them? All that kind of stuff. So it's forced me to think about that a lot. And I think with that, you have to have a legacy. You can also pass on a legacy to people who are not within your family as well.
Definitely. When you look at the family.
Exactly. When you look at the Marcus Garveys of the world, the Martin Luther Kings of the world, they left a legacy. And most of the people who have been affected by their legacy are not family members. Right. So it can also be how you impact the world as well.
Looking at your daughters and thinking about legacy, have you had the initial conversation with them at all?
It's funny you should say that, because on the weekends, when I meet with them, I'm divorced, unfortunately, so I meet with them on the weekends. And what we've been watching documentaries on, like, I'm Guyanese, so I want them to learn their culture. And so I've been showing them documentaries on Guyana, talking to them about what it was like growing up in Guyana, being born in Guyana, and also teaching them about African history as well. We've been watching YouTube videos. I first of all asked them what their thoughts were on Africans and being Black as well. And I was kind of taken back by the reaction, because it was a traditional mainstream reaction, so to speak. Oh, Africa's downtrodden, it's poor, it's basically left in the dust. So I've been trying to revamp that image, because once I became aware that was the image they had in their mind, I didn't want them to. I wanted to change that narrative.
Definitely.
And I thought it's up to me to change the narrative.
Right, definitely. Yeah, as a father, as a leader of the home. And that leads me into what I was going to be asking you next, is how important it is to leave a legacy and to make sure we break the generational stigma of the Black community?
Oh, I think it's imperative. I think it's absolutely critical. I don't think we pay much attention to it as much as we probably should. And so I think we need to I think it starts with an emphasis, number one. We put an emphasis, and then number two, we put together like a plan of how we're going to do it.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, as I look back on my parents, I look back and I learn a lot. Part of who I am, a big part of who I am is from them.
Mhm.
Right. Like my mom always, she spurred on my curiosity to read, to learn. From my dad, I learned how to communicate with people, how to get along with people. So I look and as I get older, I reflect on my life. I like, oh, wow, I learned I'm a big product of both of these guys, right? And that's the kind of impact I want to have on my kids.
So having reflected on your parents and the legacy that they have, that you too will carry on along with what you are creating?
Yeah, well, I want to add to it. I want to add to it in the sense that, like I said, in terms of, first of all, knowledge based. Number two, physically based in terms of assets and things of that nature. That's what I want to add to it. So it's important to carry it on. It's important to develop it. But I think number one, it's important to acknowledge it, that it's important, right? I think that's where a lot of people don't really, I may be wrong, but a lot of us don't really pay attention to it. And so I see in the Black community, from one generation to the next, we tend to start over,
No,
right?
no.
We're always, one generation is always, the next generation is starting over, and the next generation is starting over. Whereas in a lot of other communities, they're building, right?
That's true. Some of the start overs is because of migration. Having left
Yeah,
one region of the world to the next, you have to start all over. And then sometimes the question would be, where do I start? Sometimes it's hard to pick up from where you left off. What do you think if someone was migrated here or anywhere else in the world? How do they continue, or how do they try to build legacy?
well, that's a good point. Yeah, there is a transition when you're moving from one country to the next. Absolutely, absolutely, no two ways about it. However, once you're here and the unit is together, then we can say, okay, no, we're here. Let's move forward from today based on where we are. So what do we need to do? What do we need to do? We have to stop and reflect. What do we need to do? Where are we? What are we trying to accomplish? And once we determine those factors, then we can, fill in the blank, so to speak. Say, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. And then what the issue, I think, is once we start to get the ball rolling, is to see how the ball can be maintained and ultimately upgraded from one generation to the next. Right. And I think it does it entail a lot of planning? Yes. Does it entail a lot of thinking? Yes. It's a lot involved. I'm not saying it's simple. And I hope I'm not oversimplifying it. I'm trying to simplify it, but not oversimplify it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of thought. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen.
It can happen, and maybe not everyone is thinking like you're thinking. I like the fact that you stepped away from hosting for a while and you dug deep into the history. I watched a film during Black History Month entitled What We Deserve, from a filmmaker, Shelley Jarrett. And after watching that film, I have a lot of questions. And I mean, I think me too, I'm going to be digging for answers, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I caught that film as well. And my takeaway is, yeah, do we deserve something? Absolutely. Will it happen? I don't know. But
Will it
I
happen
definitely.
will it
I'm sorry.
happen in your will it happen in your generation? You don't know, but we have to start the ball rolling.
We have to start the ball. That doesn't. Yes, I agree with you. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't start it,
Yeah.
right? And I think so. The next step is the strategy to start it. What are we going to do? How do we accomplish this? Has this been done before? What did the people who accomplished it before? What did they do? I think those are all the things we need to look at. And I think if we can do that, then I think we have a chance. But it's going to be a battle. It's not going to happen overnight, and so you got to dig in your heels.
Yeah, and I think the start is now, beyond February, beyond the month of February. It's 365 days in a year. How do you think we have to do it at a church level, a community level? Spread the word any way we can, right?
Absolutely. I think it doesn't it's I think ultimately it starts in the home, but I think it, as I always say, things generally people say things start in the street, then they spill it in the home. I always say things start in the home and then they spill it in the street, right? And I think we have to have this discussion in our churches, in our community groups, wherever we meet, just
Okay.
so that we can, because we can also develop strength and ideas from different people as well, right? We may not have the solution to everything in within our home, but if we align ourselves with people who have solutions, then we have a chance.
Right.
It's a great opportunity to learn.
Looking back on the struggles of the Black community, and for those who stood up over the centuries so that freedom can be had today, and with you starting a podcast, what would you have to say to your audience regarding legacy? Because some people that I've spoken to before, trying to get them to be a guest here, they weren't even thinking. There was some people were just living life. They're not thinking. People are like, "Oh, good idea." So, what would you tell to your audience concerning legacy?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people. I understand where you're coming from too. A lot of people are busy. They're trying to survive, right? They're trying to, right? So a lot of times their minds are preoccupied with other things. So I understand that, right? I think, but I think when you put it out there, and I think it's a great question that you put out,
Mhm.
you sort of force people to stop and think, right? And that's really what it's all about, right? That's when we stop and when you we hear things and we're forced to reflect for a second, like, oh, I may not have thought of that, right? And but now that I'm aware of it, what am I going to do about it? And that's the next step, right? And then we can throw out ideas. Oh, maybe you can try this. Maybe you can try this. Whatever it is, right? Whatever, depending on the basis of the conversation, right? And I think for us, we have to try and find a way to like support our kids, and how do they navigate the society, right?
Right.
And what needs to be done,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's an ongoing discussion, and it's not something that's going to happen, as I said, overnight. But can it happen over several nights? Well, yeah, right. And we're talking hundreds of nights here, but
Yeah,
it's
you're
a, it's a it's we have to look at it as like it's not a sprint, right?
right.
It's a journey. It's definitely a journey, and we're taking the path of a turtle, right? So we're not a gazelle here, right? So it's bit by bit by bit, and we're gonna try things, and some things are gonna work out, some things are not gonna work out. We have to correct certain things, right? So it all depends on, I think, as a group, what do we find, and this is going to be different for everyone because everyone's definition of legacy may be different.
Yeah, it
I
differs.
see it as
And
I
it's
see it as it's
amazing.
knowledge, it's communication, right? Some people may see it as strictly, money or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So, but I think it's a combination of things. I don't think it's just one thing,
It's common. Yeah,
right?
and it's interesting. I mean, the legacy of health is one that would be good. Make sure that your family is healthy, eat healthy, teach them the way they ought to live. So because you do not have to die from whatever your foreparents went on by. Probably they didn't have the knowledge of how to eat right. Probably ate the way they ate because of circumstances. So the legacy of health is one to leave.
Absolutely. I mean, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point because uh, a lot of times we just repeat that cycle. Oh, yeah, my grandfather ate that way, and his grandfather they ate that way. And you're right. You don't have to necessarily follow the trends, what I call the negative trend, so to speak, right? Because it's easy to say, well, that's just how it is. That's just us, and that's just how it is. Well, I've always been, in terms of health, I've always been of the mindset that it's not just. I'm not saying certain things aren't hereditary,
Right, right.
but I think a lot of things is more like a habit than hereditary, which is two different things, right? And you can change your habits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even for myself. I mean, it's funny. I just a few weeks ago, I had my first full vegetarian meal,
Ooh,
right?
applause.
And thank you. Yeah, I'll pat myself on the back too. Right. And as I'm getting the meal, I'm like, oh, I'm in virgin territory here, right?
Mhm.
And but you know what? Let's try this. Let's just try this and see how it plays out,
Right.
right? And I think that for me, that's the mindset I need to have, because in the past I would have just said, you know what?
Yeah.
I'll go on a diet for today, right? I'll go on a starvation diet for today.
No.
Whereas I thought in that particular situation, I said, you know what? Let me just try it and see how it plays out. And to my surprise, it was actually very delicious
Yeah. No
and quite
harm.
filling.
Yeah.
So it opened my eyes, right? And that's why I try to keep an open mind at all times.
Right. Yeah.
Regardless of how, just you're never too old to have an open mind, in my opinion, right?
Changing the pace for something that's new always seems hard because you're used to the old way. But once you change to the new way, you embrace something that's different, and probably the
Exactly.
practice becomes perfect.
Exactly. And sometimes people don't realize that sometimes the new way is significantly better than the old way,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's why I try to keep in my own mind, just try and keep an open mind, right? I always say to myself, even if I disagree with an idea, I want to know why I disagree with it,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? A lot of times people disagree with an idea. They can't tell you why they disagree with it,
No.
because, oh, they heard their neighbor didn't like it, their brother didn't like it, their sister didn't like it, the guy down the street didn't like it, right? But it's like, okay, you know what? Let me hear you out. Let me try this idea, whatever it is. And if I don't like it, I want to know why I don't like it, right?
It's like I heard a story from African Americans in America. They were saying from generations coming down Christmas time and Thanksgiving, their moms or grandmas cut the turkey in two.
Right.
They just keep following the same tradition until one year they ask, why you cut the turkey in two? We said, because it's too big for the pan. But they thought it was something to do. So suddenly they realized the pan was too small and the turkey is so big, then they got a pan fitting for the turkey. So,
There you go.
yeah.
There you go. And that's you see, and that's the thing. Sometimes it's a subtle change. It's a small change, right? But it makes a big difference, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's why it's important to keep an open mind,
Mhm.
because once the mind is open, and I'm not saying have an open mind for everything, but once the mind is open, you have a better chance of taking in some new information
Yeah.
and working with it.
Yeah.
If it is closed, then we have no chance.
Yeah.
But once it's open, we can look at it and work with it,
Yeah.
right? And we have at that point we have a chance.
Yeah, one
And I
has
think
to be willing to make a change, a positive change. And with all the knowledge that you've gained, and as I said, I love the fact that you dug deep in history. What is your legacy?
interesting. That's an interesting point. That's ongoing at this point.
Right.
I think the question is probably to ask my kids in 10, 15 years. But uh, I am personally trying to educate them on how they can be their best selves. How can I support them being their best selves, right? And as I said, I have two daughters, and I keep telling them, I know everyone tells you you want to be, they want you to be a strong Black woman, but I want you to be a smart Black woman, right? I'm not against a strong Black woman, but I want you to be a smart Black woman.
Mhm.
And I also want you to be able to, I want you to be able to read books and read people, right? Because that's a lot of what you're going to encounter is your understanding of a situation, how you read it and how you interpret it,
Mhm.
right? So that's what I'm trying to stress on them, right? So hopefully, and they're still pretty young. We're gonna have to repeat this process over and over and over and over and over, and uh, and hopefully that'll be part of my legacy, right? That their dad, when they look back 10, 15, 20 years, say, you know what? When dad was talking his stuff, I didn't really understand it, didn't really get it, but as I look back on it now, it makes sense, and I can apply it,
Mhm.
right? So
I've heard literally in conversation with individuals, few people that says, nothing was handed down to me. I had to work hard for what I have. And they're not into leaving anything for the next generation.
well,
What are your
you know
thoughts?
what? I think, I understand where that's coming from. I
Mhm.
don't think that's a smart idea or a
No.
healthy idea, right? And I think, to me, if you want to understand, if you want to understand legacy on passing on anything to the next generation, look at the top 1%, right? The richest people in our society, they tend to pass on things to their kids, right? And they tend to make it their agenda. I mean, you look at the most successful cultures, it's not an accident. It's more likely a plan, right? It's more a plan than an accident. So I understand where people are coming from with that statement. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's the healthiest thing to do, right? I mean, I'm not saying spoil your kids but I'm saying if you can create a pathway for them to make it easier, because let's face it, when you're Black, you have to compete a lot, right?
Too much.
And it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
So if your road can be smooth, why not? Why not, right? So it's just, I think, to me, that would make more sense, right? I understand where people are coming from when they say that, but I don't think that's the smartest or the healthiest approach to your children. So you're saying, you're going to leave nothing to them and they're going to be starting over, like
creating their own, having to say the same thing too and creating their own. So you
it
see,
doesn't make sense.
A negative legacy that continues.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me. That makes no sense. That's part of being a parent, is you're supposed to be able to pass on something to make it easier for the next generation.
So with all that being said, what can you say to someone out there who is procrastinating about leaving a legacy? Because they probably are creating something for themselves. What would you say to someone, the importance of leaving a legacy for the next generation?
I think it's something they need to consider. I would encourage them to reconsider that position, right? Because whatever you can do to help your kids make it easier in the next round, of your family tradition, why not? You should. To me, that just makes sense, right? It just makes sense to do so. If they have to, we already know as Blacks, we have to work harder and smarter. We already know this is established, right? So if you don't have to duke it out, why duke it out? Right? It's logical, rational, and practical, quite frankly, right? Like, why would you make things unnecessarily hard for yourself if you don't have to? Right? Most of us have experienced that already. So why would we want to repeat that? Right? So it's just, if you have a chance to enlighten the next generation, and I think a big part of it is knowledge. It's not just money. Money is a part of it, absolutely. Yeah. But it's also knowledge. It's also guidance, right? It's insight. I mean, I think like everything else, like even as I learn about podcasting, I'm going to try and associate myself with people who know a lot more than I do. To me, that just makes sense. That just makes sense to me. Yeah. Right. That just makes sense. Like if I'm duking out if I have a problem, I'm duking it out, and another guy knows how to solve it. Why would I duke it out? This is a time wasting exercise we're looking at here, right? That's not efficient, right? So I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. So I'm gonna try and associate with people who know more than I do, so that my road can be easier. And then I'm gonna do the same for the next guy. That's how I look at it, right? So and I think if we understand that, I think when you look at this whole equation, why I think a lot of times, even as a community, why we struggle so often is because a lot of us are in silos, right? I'm by myself, you're by myself. We're all kind of, I think Caribbean Blacks were tribal.
The selfishness, too much of that's going on.
Yeah, we're tribal. We're tribal, right? I got my little tribe, and that's it. I'm the only one that groups that are successful generally don't function that way, right? If you understand groups that are like, a lot of times the groups that are successful are very small, and their wealth and their power far exceeds their numbers. And that's the only reason that is because they're really strategic and they're good planners. That's the only reason that is, right? Because in theory, it doesn't really make sense that a small group would dominate everything.
Okay. What do you think about that trait? That trait, though, wherein people are withholding information or doesn't want to join with you to have efforts so that you both can be successful?
Well, you know what? It's not everyone understands the situation, right? I always say there's three ways to look at most relationships, whether they're personal, professional, whatever. You have a win-lose. When one person wins, the other person loses. You have a lose-lose where both sides lose.
Right.
And ultimately, the best you have is a win-win, right?
Right.
And I've been in the corporate world where I've seen people who I wouldn't think would have aligned with each other, align with each other. And I've seen them both win.
See, there you go.
So I know that works, right? I've seen guys who totally despise each other work together for a common good. Even though if you ask them personally, they'll say, you know what, I can't stand the other guy.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to kill an opportunity because of that. So there's an element of maturity involved there where they can bypass their differences, right? And work together. And I think ironically, Black people need to learn this characteristic, right? Because like I always tell people, like, look, like for myself, I'm Guyanese. There are three Guyanas, right?
Oh.
And why are they three Guyanas, right? Like one's British, one's English, one's Dutch. I'm from the English speaking one. They were all three were in the same area.
Wow, they split.
And they were all fighting. They were all fighting each other.
Wow.
Right. And then one day they decided to have a meeting. And they came to a conclusion. You know, why are we fighting? Why don't we just split up the area? And that's just precisely what they did, right? Right. So they split it up. Okay, you have this area, you have another area, you have another area. And guess what? We'll bring in the slaves, we'll bring in other groups, and they'll work for us, but we'll be the top of the pyramid, and they will all work for us, and we'll all get rich. And that's what they've done, right? So I think a lot of times with us, if we look at our own history, we'll see how the things that we're fighting against have been used against us.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to learn from our own history. I think too often we're so caught up in the game, we don't see what's going on. It's a clear case of not seeing the forest in the trees, right? And a lot of the traits that we're fighting against have been used against us. So we need to stop, take a listen, and maybe copy some of these traits and make them work for us. Right? So this is why we're fighting for reparations. If we were united, slavery would not have lasted as long as it did.
No, wouldn't have. I hope you can probably utilize the time on your podcast coming up to really relay some of this information and enforce it as we go through the year. So we have just a few minutes to wrap up. So in wrapping up, your final thoughts and legacy.
Legacy, number one, is it's important. I think we should all look at it, and we should all see what we can do, because it's different things to different people, but that doesn't make it any less important, right? And I think we have to do two things. As we talk about legacy, we have to do two things. We have to talk about our own generation, and we have to talk about the next generation and how we could impact them positively.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you so much, Colin.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to listening to your podcast so that I can learn more about our culture. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And that wraps up the conversation of Coffee with Clover for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Thanks.